Good morning. My name is Misa Iwama. I'm the Director of Music Ministry, and I'm so glad to be here with you today. We're coming to you from Summit, which is the land of the Lenape. And for those who might need a visual description, I would say that I am on the shorter side compared to many of the people in this room. And as always, I'm wearing black clothes, it's sort of my uniform. We're starting the celebration of Black history, which I would say is also music history, with a song later in the service by Duke Ellington, Come Sunday. And I want you to know that next Sunday, after the second service, there's going to be a connecting session for those people who are new to Beacon or would like to learn more about you. And for that, all you have to do is see Chris Boudin, who's standing in the back and just waved, say that our congregation here today, which is you and the people who are watching online, you're one unique body of people that will probably never be exactly the same group in the future. So we'll just celebrate the fact that we were able to come together today, and you are so welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Rosemary Wright. My pronouns are she, her. Here we are. And I'm your worship associate today. I am an older woman with brown hair, glasses, and a maroon sweater. We continue our service by sharing our congregational covenant, which you should have received. If you haven't, wave down an usher. Thank you. Which is how we aspire to be in relationship together. If you are visiting Beacon, please don't feel obligated to read it, but we're going to read it together. Those of us who wish to, anyway. This is what Unitarian Universalism means: a faith of many beliefs with shared commitments and practices. We welcome you at any time to join us as a friend or member of Beacon. Chris Boudin, or Reverend Robin, would be glad to speak with you. We are a freely chosen faith. We share in our covenant, which is: love guides this congregation. Love calls us daily to acts of liberation grounded in anti-racism. We affirm that we live in a complexity of intersectionality and that building happy and loving relationships is a spiritual practice requiring both inward and outward focus. Thus, we covenant to listen deeply, speak compassionately, express gratitude, and embrace our unique diversity. We endeavor to communicate honestly and with compassion, particularly when we are in conflict. When we hurt one another, we will try to make amends, forgive, and reconnect with an intent to repair, change, and grow. Our purpose is to be radically inclusive, feed the human spirit, heal the world. In celebration of the common purpose that unites us, and with the aspiration of beloved community before us, we will do our best to abide by this covenant. Blessed be.
Thank you, Rosemary. Our first song of the day is hymn number 6 in your gray hymnal, and that is Just as Long as I Have Breath. And I invite you to rise and stand in any way possible for you and join in singing. Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to love. And I want to say also, welcome back to Nikki Denner. It's been a little bit of time since you've been here, but we're so glad to have you.
We kindle the light of the chalice, illuminate history this hour, the power of presence, and a greater path of shared liberation before us. Come, let us worship. That is, consider what is of worth. Stories and inspiration of Black Unitarian Universalists. In this beloved faith we share and seek to live anew.
Good morning. I have a question for you. What brings joy to your days? Is it something you see or touch or smell or do? Sunshine. Chocolate. Gardening. What was the other one? People. Ah. Video games. I approve. Animals. She said rockets. For me, it's enjoying my beverage of choice, depending on the time of day, and sinking into a really good story, especially if I can see myself in the narrative. This reading leads to my writing, which leads to one of my UU superheroes, Miss Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper was a household name, believe it or not, in the 19th century. She was a bit of a Kardashian, but not in the bad way. Not only was she the first African-American woman to publish a short story, but she was an influential abolitionist, suffragist, and reformer. Life certainly wasn't easy for her. Born in 1825 in Maryland, a slave state, to free parents. Eventually, by age 3, unfortunately, she was an orphan and moved to Baltimore to stay with her aunt and uncle, who happened to run a school for free Black children. And that allowed little Frances Watkins to be able to dive into stories as much as she wanted because her uncle and aunt encouraged her love for reading. When she turned 14, she picked up a job working at a bookstore. And because she worked for the family in housekeeping, they allowed her not only to have access to every book she wanted to in the bookstore, but their own personal library as well, which made little word nerd Frances Watkins super happy. She published her first book of poetry called Forest Leaves when she was only 20 years old. But in 1850, Congress passed a law allowing for the kidnapping, enslavement, and sale of any and all black people in slave states. And Maryland was a slave state. So her aunt and uncle moved to Canada, and Frances Watkins moved to Ohio, where she took a job at Union Seminary, not only being the first woman to teach there, but a little controversy because of the fact that she was African American as well. She stayed there for 2 years and eventually moved back to Pennsylvania, living in Philadelphia with the Stills. And if you know anything about the Underground Railroad, you know that they were conductors on the Underground Railroad and one of the major organizers of the organization. At that point, Frances's popularity as an author and a speaker got really, really high. The Maine Anti-Slavery Society hired her to travel around the Northeast, actually giving speeches about anti-slavery and becoming one of the most famous speakers and authors of the times. And as a way of giving back to her community, she did not charge black people admission. In 1860, the Civil War began, and Frances actually met and fell in love with a gentleman named Fenton Harper. He was a widower with 3 kids, and they got married, and eventually had a daughter of their own named Mary. She took time off from the speaker circuit so she could actually stay with her family and be a mom for a while. Unfortunately, Fenton died in 1863, and she had to return to the speaker circuit, making the difficult call to allow her children to stay with relatives while she did that work. But as an educated African-American woman making a living wage, she could express intersections about her own being like nobody else, as a woman, as African-American, as educated, and being middle class. In 1866, the National Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, New York, invited her, along with several other suffragists like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, to give presentations and speeches about different things that they wanted to be remembered as the women fought for the right to vote. Frances wanted to stress that black women had the double burden of dealing not only with racism, but with sexism at the same time, and that for suffrage to truly represent all women, black women had to be at the forefront. Unfortunately, the group split into 2 factions, either the all or nothing crew or the folks who sponsored the 15th Amendment, which ultimately allowed black men the vote. But Frances always felt kind of comfortable in 2 worlds. She not only was a member of the First Unitarian Society of Philadelphia, but she was also a member of Bethel AME Church, a predominantly black congregation. She realized that throughout her life, she always had that ability to cross over and bridge both places. And through her privilege, she was able to make change happen. She died in 1911 at 85 years old. A long, lovely life lived. But throughout her life, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper offered her voice, her words, her money, her labor, and her privilege as an educated, free black woman to raise awareness of the plight of black people, of women, and of the poor in the United States. So I ask you a favor. Will you help me remember her and hang on to her memory by using my own power, and yours as well, to speak up and fight for people who have less or have no voice? Would appreciate it. Here ends our time for all ages.
Good morning, Beacon. My name is Allison Murphy. My pronouns are she, her. I am a short white woman wearing dark clothes and a red scarf, which denotes that I am one of the chaplains here at Beacon. The role of the chaplains is to extend the spiritual care of our community. That means if you are in need of spiritual care, you can speak to one of our lead ministry team and be paired with someone who will sit with you and engage in deep listening for whatever is on your heart. Another role of our chaplains is to extend the spiritual care through our community candle lighting. Together, we light candles of joys, sorrows, and gratitudes. This morning, we light a candle of strength and protection for those who continue to endure extreme weather from our changing climate, especially this week in Southern California, where severe flooding is predicted to continue into the week. We light a candle in celebration of the first Sunday of Black History Month, and also acknowledge that in truth, every month is Black History Month. We light a candle for our innocent, unarmed brother, Amadou Diallo, shot 41 times by police while he was sitting on his front porch 25 years ago. May we continue to hold you and your family in our hearts. We light a candle for the life of 32-year-old Plainfield firefighter Marquise Hudson, who tragically gave his life in service to his hometown on January 26th in a fire. We hold his wife, his 3 young children, his entire family, and firefighting siblings in our hearts. Plainfield Mayor Adrian O'Mapp said the passing of Marquise last Friday was like losing a son. We invite those of you joining us online to light a candle at home, and those of you with us here to come forward and, excuse me, light a candle for what's on your heart this morning.
I invite you to sing with me as we go through this song. Hold on just a little while longer. Hold on just a little while longer. Hold on just a little while longer. Everything will be all right. Everything will be all right. Sing on just a little while longer. Sing on just a little while longer. Sing on just a little while longer.
Good morning, Beacon. My name is Mia Morse. I'm an African-American woman wearing a pink bow and glasses and cropped hair. We share now a litany of voices of Black Unitarians, Black Universalists, and Black Unitarian Universalists in honor of Black History Month. Your response will be, with your wisdom, we commit to beloved community. Let's try that together. With your wisdom, we commit to beloved community. Charlene.
Hello, I'm Charlene Walker, African-American woman with curly hair wearing a purple t-shirt that features a quote from Womanist. From Fannie Barrier Williams, 1855 to 1944. The hearts of Afro-American women are too warm and too large for race hatred. Long suffering has so chastened them that they are developing a special sense of sympathy for all who suffer and fail of justice.
With your wisdom, we commit to beloved community.
From Reverend Ethelred Brown, 1875 to 1956. Religion is not an opiate, but a stimulant, an incentive to noble deeds and a sustaining power in the hour of crisis.
With your wisdom, we recommit to love and community.
Hello, everybody. So my reading is from Whitney Young, 1921 to 1971. Every man is our brother, and every man's burden is our own. Where poverty exists, all are poorer. Where hate flourishes, all are corrupted. Where injustice reigns, all are unequal.
With your wisdom, we recommit to beloved community.
From Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, 1925 to 1911. We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity, and society cannot trample on the weakest and feeblest of its members without receiving the curse in its own soul. With your wisdom, we recommit to beloved community.
From Reverend Dr. Yvonne Sion, born in 1937 and still with us. We are in an era where conformity is expected, and there's a great deal of suspicion of those who do not conform. Yet, it is the nonconformists among us who push us beyond mediocrity to greatness.
With your wisdom, we recommit to beloved community.
From Reverend Marjorie Bowens Wheatley, 1946 to 2006, affirming the inherent worth and dignity of every human being, for me, means working to create places of worship where all who subscribe to a liberal approach to religion can not only feel welcome, but enter into worship settings that reflect the diverse cultural realities of we are the people.
With your wisdom, we recommit to beloved community.
From Bishop Carlton Pearson, 1953 to 2023. Truth resides within each of us. I've come to believe that authentic truth is not so much learned or taught as remembered in the deepest recesses of the soul or self, the ultimate essence of the spirit of which we all partake.
With your wisdom, we recommit to beloved community.
From our sister, Elandria Williams, who we affectionately called E, 1979 to 2020. We must embody the changes we wish to see and not just say that we believe in the changes. We must actually live the changes with every fabric of our being. If we believe in the promise of our faith, We must continue pushing forward. With your wisdom, we recommit to beloved community.
From Reverend Mikkel Slack, born in 1973 and still with us. Being that man I imagined when I was a kid is also about how I share and hold space with people of every gender, sexual orientation, ability, race, income, and faith. Doing enough of my own work to know what I need for my own healing and wholeness, and being a voice for love and justice in the world while also knowing when it's time to be quiet and listen.
With your wisdom, we recommit to beloved community.
From Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt, our current and 10th president, we are in control of what we do with our daily living. If we, each one of us, represent a missing remnant in the fabric of our collective future, then together we can lean into a possibility that we have yet to fully experience in human history, a collective wholeness, an unassailable good. So immerse yourself unapologetically in what it means to be Unitarian Universalist in these days. Then go out into the world and live, knowing that your faith matters.
With your wisdom, we recommit to beloved community.
Thank you so much, Charlene and Abby and Macaulay and Mia, and thank you to Pablo, our intern minister, for authoring that beautiful litany. I am Reverend Robin. I'm a member of the lead ministry team here. My pronouns are she and her. I am a average height white woman, middle-aged, and I am wearing a mask today, which indicates I'm recovering from COVID, and intending to share many things with you today, but COVID not being one of them. This is the first Sunday among three of a special plate collection for Sweetwater Cultural Center, and I am just delighted that my colleague and friend Owl is here to speak with us about the good and vital work that is happening at Sweetwater Cultural Center and how we can be a part of supporting it. Owl?
Ninju Sinzi Kokos Ramapo, Nawalatamon Wundak, Ato Ramapo Munsi, Dunape Anishnabeg, Anishik Kishalamokwang, Anishik Kwachi Manitou, Elamiliang, Gaganai Ki Walk Mbi Walk Kashong Walk Tindao, Anishik, 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 Anishik. Kishalamo Quang, Quingowich male, Kishalamo Quang, Quingowich male Walomwa. I'm Al from the Ramapo Muncie Nation, and I'm the tall, dark, and handsome one. Yes, you are. With the wearing a shirt, ribbon shirt with arrows on it. I have to admit, I didn't grow up in this area. My father grew up in the Ramapo Mountains, which is part of our ancestral homelands. I used to think that, coming here, I said, these people from Manhattan, how arrogant are they to say I'm number one? Then I meditated on that, and I thought, why can't they be number one? Why can't Philly be number one if they want to be number one? And so when I say that, I was thinking that, my mother told me that I was the most handsome, so that's why I feel confident in saying that. And I see my friend Charlene, and I'm sure her mother might have said the same thing. So I'm not going to argue with Charlene's mother or Charlene. So Charlene wants to be the most beautiful person. I'm not going to argue with her, but my mother told me I'm the most beautiful. So as I'm sure all mothers, when they see their babies, those babies are the most beautiful in the world. So it's a different way of looking at things. So I appreciate that Manhattan arrogance, if you can say that. So I introduced myself as Al from the Deer Clan of the Ramapo Nation, of the Muncie people, the Lenape people, of the larger Anishinaabe people. So the smaller circle to the larger circle. And I'll translate the prayer I said in Muncie later. And I really appreciate how the ancestors are brought in, and I'll just mention two of mine. I mean, I feel almost like one of those Cecil B. DeMille films, A Cast of Thousands, you know, so. I'm a descendant of Samson Occam, who was noted, maybe one of the first indigenous preachers who was preaching Christianity in the mid-1700s. And he had a very important mission, one that's still with us today. And really, he was building a bridge between the different worlds, indigenous, Christianity. He was actually one of the founders of Dartmouth. Problem being that when he went to England, raised a lot of money, when he got back, not only did his partner move Dartmouth from where it was supposed to be in Connecticut to New Hampshire, he didn't even take care of his family. And in the mission of the school went from one of educating indigenous people to, you know, rich, wealthy white people, and the rest is history, I guess, in the Ivy League. Then he went to found an interfaith community, indigenous community in Stockbridge, and for reasons I still understand, they had to move themselves later on, and that seems to be one of the tragedies in our country, is that, you know, you have, say, Christianity or different ways where we can come in true brotherhood, but unfortunately, even many people who practice that don't necessarily live that. So another ancestor I have is Amelia Boynton Robinson. She was one of the women in Selma who really, her house was the place for the Voting Rights Act. Really, it was like the headquarters. And I remember hearing a story from Andrew Jackson where LBJ said, you know, I'd like to do what you're saying, but I don't have the backing. Dr. King said, you know, we need to get him some backing. And then my great aunt called him and said, we need help in Alabama, Alabama, Selma, and the rest is history. There's a lot I have to say, but I'll try to be brief. A lot of my current environmental work really is has a great debt of gratitude to Standing Rock. And out of there, they had a phrase that's really powerful. They called it, they would say, Mini Wachoni. Mini Wachoni, which means water is life. Water is life. In our Muncie language, we would say, Mbi water, Imbu Masawakanam. You know, I walk in the ways of water. Or water is my life. So yeah, we had a prayer camp in solidarity with Standing Rock, and we were able to stop the Pilgrim pipeline. But I think it was Reverend Boyer, he says, no wind ever stays one. So just two things to look out for. There's a project they call Project Maple, where they want to dramatically expand the pipeline infrastructure in the Northeast, starting in the Ramapo Mountains, to bring frac gas from Pennsylvania through the Northeast and probably eventually to Europe with the natural gas. So it's all intertwined. The wars, you know, the climate change, it all comes together. So Project Maple is something to keep an eye on. And another is Indian Point, the nuclear. So we had some big victories there in New York. They prohibited the dumping of toxic waste into the river. But again, the questions still arise, like what do we do with this waste? You know, so out of a lot of this emerged the Sweetwater Cultural Center under the vision of Chief Dwayne Perry, and the former Presbyterian Church was gifted to the Ramapo people through the Sweetwater Cultural Center, which is a New York-based 501c3 corporation. And it's interesting that was mentioned about no voice. That is part of the vision that Chief Perry brought forth, is giving a voice to the voiceless. So, you know, we're looking at, it was at our prayer camp, you know, spaces like this where we can, intersectionality, where we can have different people meet and come together. So, you know, we're kind of hitting a bit of a rough spot here. I'm not going to give a Valley Forge type speech, but let's just say sometimes I go there trying to work, I feel like I'm in a refrigerator. But we're looking for some basic support to help create this space for intersectionality and to deal with some of these major issues that the world faces right now. So the translation of the monthly prayer that I gave in the beginning was it was a prayer of thanks for the earth. So Anashi Kisha Lamokoing, Anashi Kwachi Manitou, that was thanks for our words for the Creator, who created us from thought, oftentimes translated as Great Spirit, for giving us the earth, the waters, wind, and fire. And a realization that what we most need in this world, we actually have right now, is gifts of our Mother Earth. And that's part of the tragedy, is that we don't seem to realize that in trying to get what we want. Unfortunately, we're in an era where we're destroying what we need. And then finally, I was just asking for help from Creator, and we all need that every day. So just wanted to thank you for your time here and for your support for the Sweetwater Cultural Center, Andashik.
Anashik, thank you, Owl. And beloved, thank you for your generosity. Every bit of this Sunday's offering and the offering over the next few weeks will go to support the vital mission of Sweetwater Cultural Center. This includes our online giving and any donations that you're able to give in subsequent Sundays. Thank you so much for your generosity. Owl, thank you for being with us today. Thank you, Misa. Thank you, Nikki. The year is 1866. Just 1 year after slavery is abolished with the 13th Amendment, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, as we heard from Jermaine, is an established and well-known name in the American household. A suffragist and an abolitionist, she attends the National Women's Rights Convention in New York. It is the same year that Susan B. Anthony, also a Unitarian, delivers an impassioned speech for the rights of women to vote. But Susan B. Anthony has a sharp disagreement with Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, as well as Frederick Douglass. She believes that the right for women to vote should come before the rights of freed black men, what becomes embodied in the 15th Amendment. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper argues, along with Douglass, that the two struggles, freed black persons to vote and women to vote, are one suffrage movement. Speaking in response to Susan B. Anthony's cry for the rights of women, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper responds on the stage with the following. I feel I am something of a novice upon this platform. Born of a race whose inheritance has been outrage and wrong, most of my life had been spent in battling against these wrongs. But I did not feel as keenly as others that I had these rights in common with other women, which are now demanded. About 2 years ago, I stood within the shadows of my home. A great sorrow had fallen upon my life. My husband had died suddenly, leaving me a widow with 4 children, one my own and the others stepchildren. I tried to keep my children together, but my husband died in debt. And before he had been in his grave 3 months, the administrator had swept the very milk crocks and wash tubs from my hands. I was a farmer's wife and made butter for the Columbus market, but what could I do when they had swept it all away? They left me one thing, and that was a looking glass. Had I died instead of my husband, how different would have been the result? By this time, he would have had another wife, it is likely, and no administrator would have gone into his house, broken up his home, sold his bed, and taken away his means of support. She continues and concludes, we are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity, and society cannot trample on the weakest and feeblest of its members without receiving the curse in its own soul. Of course, history tells us plainly that Douglass and Harper were correct. The women's suffrage movement would take another 50 years for women to gain the right to vote. Neither Susan B. Anthony nor Frances Ellen Watkins Harper would live to see that day. The legacy that Frances Ellen Watkins Harper left would not only transform Unitarian Universalism, but would transform the world. Nearly a century after she spoke those words at the Women's Convention, a young minister completing his doctorate in theology in Boston by the name of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. came upon her words and adapted them into the quote we know so well. We are caught, Dr. King taught, in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. He took that quote from Harper. This month we celebrate and honor Black History Month, but in truth we know Black History Month is every month. It is a time, yes, to acknowledge the pain and persistence of racism, but it should also, more importantly, be a time of celebrating Black history, which is inextricably linked to the history of this country and to the history of Unitarian Universalism. celebrating the achievements and contributions from Black musicians, composers, visual artists, poets, authors, scientists, inventors, engineers, politicians, philosophers, and leaders of social movements for progress. It's a little hard to breathe and preach. Whew. We celebrate today in this inescapable network of mutuality the history of Black Unitarians and Black Universalists and Black Unitarian Universalists. Now, I'm going to be honest, when I became a Unitarian Universalist, I barely heard any stories about Black UU history. You would have thought that Black Unitarian Universalists were only new to our faith in the 20th century. And yet I heard extensive tales of Susan B. Anthony, who was arguably less engaged in Unitarianism than Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. Over time, I certainly became aware of times in Unitarian Universalism where Black Unitarians and Black Universalists were pushed out or away, but the beauty and strength and promise of Unitarian Universalism was diminished by what the artist Lauryn Hill calls miseducation, my miseducation. I was also, though, taught by a feminist biblical scholar that when reading the Bible, we ministers had a responsibility to read the silences. Elizabeth Schussler Fiorenza taught us, read for what isn't spoken in the story, for those who in the text are silent and yet spoke words not recorded. Reading Paul's letters about the conduct of women, well, why might Paul have to address the conduct of women in the early Christian church? What might Christian women have been saying and doing that caused such a reactive and defensive posture in Paul? It surely wasn't that women didn't exist in the early Christian church, that they weren't in leadership, that they weren't some of the first disciples. The same is true of our history books in our schools, and despite how progressive we can be, that same hermeneutic, that's a $2 seminary word, which is just a fancy way of saying, how do you know what you know? That same hermeneutic needs to be applied to our faith. There is a role of storytellers in many cultures. In West Africa, it's sort of a sacred role called the griot. It's almost like someone who is a healer or a religious leader. The storyteller has that much power. Because telling our histories is an incredible tool for good or for oppression. Black Unitarians, Black Universalists, and Black UU shaped and are shaping what is Unitarian Universalism today. And as my colleague and Unitarian Universalist leader, Paula Cole-Jones, who was raised in All Souls Church in Washington, D.C., reminds me, not every UU's experience is of a predominantly white congregation. I grew up, she says, always knowing a multicultural, multiracial Unitarian Universalism. A long-standing tradition in our faith as Unitarian Universalists is education equity. We believe in education. We have fought for education. We have been the builders of educational institutions across the centuries. Part of education is telling our own truth as a faith, learning it, cultivating it, seeking it out. Having the hermeneutic, the ethics to wonder when all you are given is a volume of one voice of our faith, as diverse and progressive as ours, to have the courage to raise your hand and say, where's the rest of the history? Right now in our state and across our country, education itself is under attack. Yes? Yes. Have you heard these stories or? Why do we think education is under attack? Because education is the primary way to try to take power over people, take away their education. It is why teaching enslaved people was a criminal offense during slavery. It is upon the complete shutdown of Reconstruction that schools like the thousands built by Julius Rosenwald and Booker T. Washington were often burned to the ground shortly after construction. Education is the key to liberation and to movements, and it is also the greatest weapon. As scholar and author Willie Baptist reminds us, ask what the white students learned during slavery in the United States, or German students during Hitler's reign, or students in North Korea are learning now under Kim Jong-un. Education, including the telling of history, is a tool that can be weaponized. As progressives, I have hope that we can push hard against the attacks on education in the public square, but from a spiritual call to be griot, to be storytellers, to be healers of history, to pass on fuller histories and her stories and our stories. It is our responsibility now, all of us, to learn and seek out the history, to share it, to fight for its veracity in our schools, and expect that Black history be more than a month and more than a short report on Harriet Tubman. Here in our congregation, it is the story, yes, of Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. It is also the story of Fannie Barrier Williams, who was a women's rights activist, who was the first African-American woman to be admitted to the Chicago Women's Club. She worked with Jane Addams to found and create Hull House. It is also the history of Professor Bill Jones, a foundational writer in 20th century humanism and a Unitarian Universalist. It is the story of Paula Cole Jones, who created the concept community of communities, and is among those leaders leading our entire denomination in a new articulation of our faith and principles. It is the story of Edna Mae Griffin, who was the first Black woman to be on the board of the UUA, Board of Directors, and who was a civil rights activist that the Reverend Dr. Rockman, author of The Rough Side of the Mountain, get a copy if you can. It's also on Kindle, just one click. It is what Dr. Rockman calls Griffin the Rosa Parks of Des Moines, Iowa. And the history of Alondria Williams, known as E, the first Black UU to hold the highest volunteer office in our association, that of moderator. And it is present history, now she might not like me after this, Mia Morris, who led the UU Metro New York district here in one of the most significant shifts to regionalization in our association's history, who was on the Religious Education Credentialing Committee for the entire association, and is president of the board of UU Faith Action New Jersey and co-leader of the Pablo Vasquez Internship Committee. The next generation of Unitarian Universalist leaders will largely say that they were shaped and touched by the life and guidance and wisdom of Mia Morris. Beloved, Unitarian Universalism is not a white faith that is suddenly waking up to anti-racism. It has always been a multicultural, multiracial, multi-religious faith formed both by the voices of those who were at the margins and those who held great societal power. It is the paradox and compelling truth of our origins, one that births both accountability and hope, reparations and transformation. Telling the history, learning the history, sharing the history is also about building up a generation that hears the message, I can, I will, we shall. It is a faithful declaration against institutional defamation and systemic hurt of who gets to be in the future story. It is at our core the decision to overturn the oppression of invisibility. Like those biblical stories, the authors may have silenced the women, the enslaved person, the queer person, the elderly person, but we know they lived. We know they had voices and life work that shaped a generation, whether it was recorded in the record or not. In a forgetful, fast-paced world, let us take on the sacred work of remembrance. In an unholy, silent space, let us speak the names and tell the stories. In a hopeless time, let us shine the light of a truth passed as a flame from generation to generation. It is our turn now. May we be faithful healers of history, storytellers, flame keepers of this faith. Amen.
Okay, we're going to take that inspiration from Reverend Robin and we're going to sing, I'm on my way. This is a call and response. So if you hear the first phrase, you can just echo it back. And we're going to sing it together. And I'll just teach it to you as we start. It starts like this. I'm on my way. I'm on my way to the freedom land. To the freedom land. I'm on my way. I'm on my way to the freedom land. To the freedom land. I'm on my way to the freedom land. Okay, and this is for the one time where it changes. We're going to sing this together. I'm on my way, glory, hallelujah. I'm on my way. And it goes like this. I'm on my way, glory, hallelujah. I'm on my way. So that kind of refrain happens at the end of each verse where we actually stop echoing and sing together. So I'm going to start from the beginning. I invite you to rise in any way possible and join in singing. I'm on my way, to the freedom land. I'm on my way to the freedom land. I'm on my way to the freedom land. Together. I'm on my way, glory, hallelujah. I'm on my way. All right. I ask my neighbor, come and go with me. I ask my neighbor, come and go with me. I ask my neighbor, come and go with me. I'm on my way, glory, hallelujah. I'm on my way. I'm on my way, and I won't turn back. I'm on my way, and I won't turn back. I'm on my way, and I won't turn back. Do it together. I'm on my way, glory, hallelujah. I'm on my way.
Thank you, Misa. I invite you to please take hands as you're able for our closing benediction. If you're joining us online, perhaps extending your hands toward me. And Abby, if I could give you the chalice, because I have no way to extinguish it. Thank you. And now, beloved, may the love that is our source and ultimate return, may it hold you, and what's more, may it animate your life. May it lead you to speak words of liberation, to live deeds of a free faith, to share this love and, yes, this light with all whom you meet, until the winds of favor bring us together once more. Blessed may you be.